Coming down to some sectors, where transformation has really worked. In your book, you've mapped out some industries that have been transformation leaders. Can you elaborate for us, with some examples of some other industries that have been disrupted and which have now opened up the gaps between industry laggards and leaders?
So if you asked me this question a year and a half ago, I would have sort of described industries in three clusters. The first is industries that have very high customer touch, end consumer touch, such as media and entertainment, or healthcare, or retail, telecom, high-tech, banking, etc. Industries that have this very high customer touch are getting feedback loops at very high volumes and very, very quickly. And moves that competitors make in these industries become visible very quickly because everybody at the end of the day is in front of that customer. Right? So for example, if Reliance Jio launches a feature, it's visible to all other competitors, right? Or if Procter & Gamble launches a particular product, it'll be immediately visible to their competitors, and so on and so forth. These industries transform the fastest. And then there are industries right in the middle that are slightly removed from end consumers. They tend to be in the middle of the road. And then there's a third cluster, which is highly regulated industries, like life insurance, health insurance, energy, right, etc. They are oftentimes the slowest moving. But as COVID has progressed and all industries have been forced to rethink, you are now seeing a new breed of what I call as, Davids in the David versus Goliath, metaphor emerging. Right? They're defying the velocity and the patterns of the industry. These digital startups, digital tech startups in these different industries are accelerating the pace. So in short, the velocity of change across all industries is going to pick up in the next few years.
Now, with the pandemic, and the pandemic is really front and center, right? We still haven't come out of it, and we don't know whether the light is still the light at the end of the tunnel or still that oncoming train. Which industries do you think will see the maximum benefits of digital transformation and thus will realize outsized benefits from this disruption?
See, I would rephrase your question to think at a company level and not at an industry level, right? Because if I am a company, no matter what my size is, right, the only choice that I have is to transform, right? In fact, in the book, I describe a particular matrix where if you're a very large company, with a massive presence in the industry and you become complacent, your business model will be reinvented. We have seen that in retail. If you're a small company that is weak and slow, you will be extinguished, right? But if you're a small to mid-sized company or a large company, but the velocity of your transformation is fast, then you'll start leading the industry at some point in time. So I would worry less about industry and competition, and I would worry more about where my enterprise or B2C customers are headed and start reinventing my business on that model. And when you do that, every sector has the same opportunity. And the converse is also true. Companies that take their position for granted are no longer going to exist. In fact, in the book, I point out that 30 to 40% of companies that we know today as great brand names will cease to exist by 2030.
That's interestingly something that happened even, I think, about 2 decades ago, right? The companies back, for instance, the Kodaks of the world, etc. So many of them, who were the Fortune 500 and are just not there today. So Sri, I want you to do a bit of crystal ball gazing, and maybe not crystal ball gazing because you've really done a lot of research for your book, so clearly you understand this very well. What will be the top 3 digital technologies that you think will transform businesses and experiences in the near term?
So when we talk about the technology dimension, right, there are 3 or 4 core foundational technology pillars that are critical, right? If you recall the 10 rules in the book, I talk about replacing assumptions with data, right? Why is that important? There is so much of data that is getting generated about a company that the historical view that my systems inside the organization tell me everything is false. Because most of the data that affects the company beyond the transactions is actually resident outside of the company. It's only when you analyze what customers are talking about, what competitors are doing, what new technologies are coming up, what regulators are thinking, and be able to forecast where your industry is headed or what the opportunity is, will you be able to objectively prioritize the sequence of your transformation. So analytics is going to be number one. It's almost like driving a car without a dashboard in a snowstorm. You will never do that, right? And so the analytics are the dashboard and they are the windshield wipers. They tell you where you're headed. Number two is cloud, right? The amounts of data that we generate and the velocity with which we have to deliver new applications and new technologies it's at a breakneck speed. Neither of these two can be done when the fundamental infrastructure of the organization is still in the traditional format, right? The larger the company, the bigger the challenge. The faster the growth of the company, the bigger the challenge, right? And so cloud is neck to neck with business analytics as a technology paradigm. And number three is obviously modernizing applications. And so any and every mobile technology, web app technology, which deliver great experiences and where you can embed analytics into those applications themselves is the third pillar. Now, with mobility coming in and data moving from Reliance to you or your favorite restaurant to you, etc., data is moving outside of the firewalls of the company. It's floating around in cyberspace. That's why we hear of so many hacks. And so therefore, security becomes a very important ring fence. We're used to thinking about physical security. We have evolved from that to data center security. But to think about digital enterprise security is a very different sort of a ball game. And these four sort of come together to deliver the transformation to a business.
Now, if I could ask you to maybe look a little further towards the horizon, what do you think we'll be talking about in about 5 years from now? I know currently in the technology paradigm, metaverse, for instance, is something that's very, very big now. The amalgamation of real and virtual worlds, etc. Where do you see some of these trends going, and where do you see technology 5 years from now?
Well. On a lighter note, you're asking me a question that goes against the grain of the book, which is to be data-driven, right? So I cannot graze into a crystal ball, so to speak. But still, to take a shot at it, I think in this entire digital transformation sequence, in this passage of time, we're still in the very early stage. And in the book, I talk about the first industrial revolution, right? 17th century, 18th century, and so on. The effects of that were felt outside of the British Commonwealth many, many years later, right? And so we're sort of in that phase where the plumbing of industries, the plumbing of how we govern, the plumbing of how we deliver products and services, etc., is all going through a transformation, right? The next stage of this is business transformation, right? In business transformation, what happens is that when you have digitalized your products and services, your engagement with customers from one end to the other, and your engagement with employees as well, right? Your business of today starts picking up and takes a different shape. But along the way, you start getting ideas that are completely foreign to your existing business. So in the book, I talk about how Amazon went from being a bookseller to a tech company and a retailer, right? The same thing happens to successful companies, one after the other. And so the business starts transforming. And I think in the final stage, you will see collisions between industries, right? When the value proposition of one industry entirely obsoletes the value proposition of another industry. To give you a very simple example, when the horse cart, was in prevalence, and Daimler and Benz, Carl Benz invented the first car, people would refuse to sit on it because they felt unsafe. A decade later, we came to know what happened. The entire horse cart industry, if you may, was completely wiped out. Now, if I were to continue that analogy in today, we've gone from petrol and diesel cars to hybrids to electric cars. And next is going to come flying cars. right, which are already being approved by so many governments everywhere. Think about the consequences of that. When the flying cars becomes a commodity that is available as a GM or a Ford or a Honda or a Toyota car, and consumers are able to use it, many technologies have come together. Electric has come together. Driverless has come together because people will not be allowed to fly, right? The car and the aviation industry, automobile and aviation industry have now collided. So who will win that battle? Is it going to be Boeing or Airbus, or somebody else? Or is it going to be the car companies? And so that is sort of going to be the evolution. We will get to maybe 5 to 10 years from now, where the products and services that you use today, right, may not even exist at an industry level and then get replaced by another industry.